The Merc With A Mouth, Wade Wilson, Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool, you know the name, finally paired up with Wolverine for the third movie in the franchise and for their first appearance in the MCU. Welcome to Easily Entertained. I am your host, Bryson Olson, here to talk about all things entertainment. Today, of course, we are talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. I thought it was great. I very much enjoyed it. Not everybody agrees with me, but let's talk about why I think Deadpool and Wolverine works as a movie, as well as some of the things that I don't think work. Starting with jokes, fights, and more jokes. When you go into a Deadpool movie, you kind of already know what you're going to be expecting. You're going to get some crazy R-rated jokes, as well as some crazy R-rated fight scenes. It's pretty fun time. You know, you kind of get what you're going for. It's part of the charm of the Deadpool franchise. You've come to expect it. And I think Deadpool and Wolverine is no different. In fact, both aspects I feel like are kind of amped up in some ways in this one. The humor is obviously still there, but I think it's a bit different than the other two movies, which I think is why some people have complained a little bit, is just because the humor is different. I still think it's funny, but it is just a different kind of humor. Like, they're not using the same kind of more graphic descriptions that they were using for the other ones. Like, the other ones, they talk a lot about like how Wade looks, whereas this one, it's more about how he acts. Yeah, they're different, but I think they're on the same realm, and it still feels like Deadpool, so I don't think it's that bad. I can imagine part of it is just because it's now owned by Disney, but at the same time, I remember seeing something, they included the F word like 118 times. So, like, did they really affect anything? But I think it's just a different kind of humor, and so maybe that's kind of what people are turned off on. But as part of the humor, I feel like we're also getting a lot more fourth wall breaking in this one. I think especially just because you can play with it more as they transferred studios. So they reference the studios, both Fox and Disney. You have Deadpool physically grabbing the camera and talking to it. You have the constant cameos and references to shows and other things within the Marvel universe that we as an audience would have seen, but the characters would have not experienced. So I think that was kind of just amped up a little bit. And that's like his whole thing is fourth wall breaking. So it kind of makes sense that they would have all these different timeline references in this movie over any of the others. And I kind of like it because, like, we've had a lot of the multiverse stuff right now, and so I think Deadpool is kind of the best character to kind of go through that. Like, Spider-Man, I think, is a good character to do that, like, within the story, but outside of a story and more referencing, I think Deadpool does a good job of it. So that's the humor stuff. So let's talk about the fights as well, something a lot of people, including myself, had some concern about, like with the R-ratedness of Deadpool. I was a bit worried it would get brought down a little bit because of being in the MCU and it is owned by Disney. Like, they said it was going to be R, but I was still guessing they would maybe like try and make it like base R-rated. But I don't think that was the case. In fact, the first like major fight scene goes right against that idea. Still very gruesome, very funny, and very much Deadpool. It was also just a clever way to get like credits in as well at the beginning of the movie, and you have an actual purpose for it in the story because he's like desecrating Logan's decayed body and using his adamantium skeleton as weapons. And I just think, you know, it kind of works for Deadpool. But mentioning Logan and his decaying body, let's get into Logan's legacy. After Logan, which was an astounding film, ending the decade-long appearance of a character on the big screen, fans were a bit concerned and hesitant, and I think rightfully so, as to where Deadpool and Wolverine was going to fit into things and how they were going to introduce Wolverine, as the Logan that we're used to was dead. And they sort of addressed it and sort of did it at the same time. And they did it kind of immediately, too. So they acknowledge that the events of Logan take place within the same timeline as Deadpool. Like, that's the X-Men timeline. But they don't really say if it's the future or not. Like, it's implied that it's the future, but they don't say for sure. And they have this concept called the anchor being, a person that is so integral to the timeline's universe that if they die or disappear, the timeline collapses. And Logan is supposed to be that being, but when he dies in the future, the timeline starts to degrade. And so the way Deadpool fixes this is by obviously going to a different timeline and bringing another Logan to his universe, which causes all the shenanigans. I don't think this is necessarily a bad plot device. In fact, I do think it's interesting having an anchor being, someone like that is so integral to that universe. And I feel like Logan would, of course, be the character. But like, the more you think about the concept of an anchor being, the more it doesn't really make sense. There are a few reasons why I don't think this makes sense. Because, one, if the events of Logan happen in the future, then the timeline is degrading, even though the time they're in now should still have a Logan. So, like, I would understand the timeline degrading afterwards, but I don't understand the timeline degrading when he dies in the future. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand. Because, like, and I'm guessing Logan is, like, supposed to be the anchor being just because, like, he has such a strong regenerative healing factor. Like, he basically is immortal and should be able to live forever. So, like, that kind of makes sense, but if he dies, like, why? Like, I don't really understand why. And then, like, what about when he wasn't even born? Like, when he didn't exist, was there a different anchor being? Was he always the anchor being and he was kind of just like set in that universe to like always be there? Like, his atoms are there or whatever and they just haven't done anything, or what? That I don't really get. Like, the anchor being, I think as a concept is interesting. However, it's harder to explain. I think having an anchor being be a character is not very good. I feel like if they were to have an anchor being, it has to be someone who is so powerful, like they couldn't ever die. Like, they are beyond that universe's space and time limitations. Like, that would make sense. But I don't know. It's just kind of, it's a weird gray area, so I don't really understand it. You know, they just keep coming up with more multiverse concepts and it gets ridiculous. You have anchor beings, you have what is it? Insurrection? No, that's the January 6th thing. Resurgence or insurgents, something like that they talk about in Doctor Strange. You have somehow different versions of people being able to interact with each other in, like, Spider-Man. And, like, I like the multiverse stuff, but I feel like it gets too complicated and then it's hard for them to actually explain it and keep consistency on how they explain it. And for this movie, they really just needed an excuse to just bring Wolverine into the MCU. I understand. I get it. It's how we're able to get things into the MCU is through the multiverse. It's just confusing. But anyways, let's get to Welcome to the MCU. So now Deadpool, Wolverine, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, they are all now technically a part of the MCU. They are within a different timeline, but they do exist within the same overarching universe, which I think is great. I remember how excited I was for when Spider-Man was joining through Civil War. That was the hype of the century. It was so exciting because we were like, we need Spider-Man to join the Avengers because this will be freaking awesome. And I think that's great. And now we have some more characters that they can have more stories with and interact in different fun kind of ways. And I like that. That's what the MCU got started with. And despite some of the recent flops, I still think the MCU is overall pretty decent. Some of the more recent ones, like Quantumania, people didn't like. I thought it was all right. I did a review on it, and I probably said it was better than what I actually think now because it was immediately after I watched it. But I thought it was okay. It wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen. Multiverse of Madness, pretty good. Thor Love and Thunder, I had liked when it first came out, and now I really don't like it. But we also have Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which was pretty great. You have The Marvels, which I just watched recently, and it's not amazing, but it's not the worst movie. Like, it could have been worse. Like, it's still kind of dumb and corny, and I don't really like the dialogue seems to fall flat a lot of the times, but I don't think it's like the worst movie I've ever seen. That belongs to Citizen Kane still. But they, they're not all great, and they don't all have to be great, but I still think they are fun most of the time. And I think some people try to blame Disney for this, but I think sometimes it is a change in the audience as well as just an oversaturation of a market. For a while, it was just one movie a year, or we got 2 and then 3, and then it became 3 and a few shows. And it just got to the point where it's kind of too much to keep up with. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. And it just changed how we viewed it. Quality dropped for some projects because there are too many projects going around, and we just wanted something different. And I understand all of that. And while it still fits into the MCU style, I think Deadpool and Wolverine brings a bit of difference into the MCU. It takes what worked with the Fox movies of Deadpool and X-Men and expanded on it to fit into this new universe. Another reviewer, the Cosmonaut Variety Hour, I think put it in better words, saying this movie was kind of like a send-off to the Fox era of X-Men, Deadpool, and the Fantastic Four. And I completely agree. I think it really allowed them to kind of pay homage to it while also being like, and now we're with another studio. See ya. So, I kind of like that. I think with these new characters, if they slow down a bit and change up some things and, not with bringing back the same actors just for different roles, they could have some fun. I'd love to see a Deadpool and Spider-Man team up. I love reading those kind of comics where they're teaming up because Spider-Man just hates Deadpool, and I think it's funny, and I think that would be great on screen with Ryan Reynolds and Tom Holland acting against each other. I think that'd be great. Or you have the Fantastic Four or X-Men interacting with the new Avengers. I think that would be great. And I tend to try being pretty hopeful, and I think a lot of people aren't that way, especially with the MCU post Endgame. And I think it's understandable because, expectations were really high for that era, and it's hard to live up to the legacy that carries on. But I'm cautiously optimistic to see what happens with the MCU going forward, and I think this movie being a merger between old and new gives me some extra optimism. I think we need to get the superhero trend of fighting in a wasteland, like the end of time. I think we need to switch that out and go back to being more like cities and more dynamic landscapes. I think that would be more interesting. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion, but it's whatever. But Deadpool and Wolverine, they gave us a glimpse of what things could be like. They brought old into the new with some fun jokes, some fun fight scenes, and some hilarious characters, both ones that we've seen before and ones that are kind of being introduced. And I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. And I think for Deadpool and Wolverine, for the Deadpool franchise, third time's the charm. So now let's talk about our rating. If you don't know our easily entertained rating scale from least to worst, it is garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And the other 2 Deadpool movies, I don't know. It's hard to decide which ones I like the most because I think they're all kind of within the same realm. So I'm going to put Deadpool and Wolverine in quotable, with my favorite quote being when he grabs the camera and
suck it, Fox. On the moon at Disneyland.
Loved it. It was a great fourth wall break while also being kind of a memorable. I know the big trend going around is the one from Gambit, and he's like, "Ooh, I'm about to make a name for myself here," and that I think is pretty great too. I think they had some funny quotes throughout the movie, and I really liked it. And so now let's get into our question of the week. This is a question to just get you interested in the discussion about our topic this week. And since we're, talking about superheroes and stuff, and we deal with mutants and X-Men and, the Marvel universe, of course I'm going to ask, what is the best superpower? Not what superpower you would pick, but which superpower is the best. And if anyone says anything other than teleportation, they're wrong, because teleportation is definitely the best superpower, because you can do so many things. If you think Nightcrawler in X-Men, he's literally the best. Just being able to teleport everywhere is freaking sick. And even when they try to put limitations on it, where they're like, you can only see where you're teleporting. It's like, okay, I will just keep on teleporting. Or you have to have a cooldown or something. I don't think there's any major limitation that really makes teleportation bad, but I think other powers, you could make them bad with some limitations. So teleportation is obviously the best superpower. If you want to debate me, please comment down below. And that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit that like button, give us a follow so you can be notified of all the latest episodes. And until next time, bye.